What are some things that can get you fired? Jamaica's labor laws are very specific, and it may sometimes seem like employees have the upper hand, but there are some dismissible offenses. I'm Kalilah Reynolds, and it's time for another episode of Money Moves, JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Collin Virgo, Assistant General Secretary at Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, is back with me this week. Welcome back, Collin. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest on this program. We were talking about termination processes. If an employer wants to fire an employee, there's a specific legal process that has to be adhered to in order for it to be a legal termination.
Correct.
But in talking to you behind the scenes, I now get to understand that there are dismissible offenses that you don't need to go through all that rigmarole for. So what are some dismissible offenses?
No, man, I don't. Why you misquote me at all?
No? All right, well you
So
have
the
the
bigger
opportunity
point-
to clarify.
The bigger point I was making is that there are some offenses that are dismissible off the bat. When I say off the bat, though, I don't want anybody to misread that and say that you can kick the person out the door right away and then that's the end of the matter. It's never as simple as that. So I was in a PSOJ forum the other day where they were talking about industrial relations issues in Jamaica and whatever. You know, I heard a lot of employers going on and quarreling and saying that, boy, the Jamaican labor laws are too biased. And they're biased to the employees, right? Employers have no rights and whatever. And that's absolute nonsense. It's not true. It's not true. Let me just explain simply why. The same rights that are afforded, and in making this point, I have to stress this. I am so distressed when I hear certain lawyers going on the same line of argument and making the same point. Because more than the employers, who I appreciate sometimes are very frustrated, the lawyers ought not to be making those statements because they, more than anybody else, ought to appreciate the rules and principles of natural justice. The rules and the principles of natural justice dictate that the same person must not be the judge, jury, and executioner. And that is why companies find themselves in problems all the time, because the same person who does the accusing is the same person who determines that you are guilty of the matter, and the same person that punishes you or fires you or whatever the sanction is. Right? No, we are in law. Is that allowed? The law is very, very, very clear. So those tenets that are in the labor laws are the very same that are in civil and criminal law.
But if you have a very small company, 5 employees and the boss, then who do you turn to? Because you don't have an HR department per se.
All right. Good question. I love this. Right? All right. Good point. Now, let me tell you. Does justice apply only for the big man and not for the small man?
You're asking me?
Yeah, man.
Oh, justice is universal, or it ought to be.
That's the point. That's the point. So, in the same way that if you're driving along a particular road and a policeman stops you and says, but Mrs. Reynolds, this is a one way, right? How you're driving this way? And you say, oh my goodness, officer, right? I never know. Yes, the policeman might decide to use his discretion and not charge you. But if he tickets you, he has done nothing wrong. Despite the fact that you did not know, that you probably genuinely and truthfully did not know that it was a one-way road. It was a one-way road, so you broke the law. It is the same thing with industrial relations, any other form of justice. It is the very same thing. So, you have an employee working at your place. A small, all right, I run one, so I know, small family business. Right? 5 people in the whole company. Perfectly, as you said. You catch one of the employees on the camera when they're stealing, right? The law does not permit you to just fire the person right away and send them home.
So this is what fascinated me last time, because we had this discussion with our guest and she made the same point, and we're curious as to, well, why not?
Because
if you're caught on camera, isn't the camera the impartial party?
Because if you have done that, as in you saw the person on the camera, so you're satisfied in yourself that yes, this person stole from me, and what have you, I am firing them, and you just proceed and do that, and you send them home. If that person challenges it afterwards, they will win. And they will win because you did not follow a process. Because what you just did in that instance, you made yourself judge, jury, and executioner, which in no form of law is allowed. So what should you do in that situation? So in the same way, if the Jamaica Eye cameras catch a person robbing a schoolgirl on the roadside, grab her bag off her shoulder, take away her phone, and stab her with a knife. It caught on camera, plain as day. The law still says that the police can't just go and scrape up the man, lock him up, and throw away the key. He has to be charged. There's a process in how he has to be charged. He has to be given the right to a defense. He has to be given a hearing and or a trial, right? Where he has the opportunity to come and present that defense.
Should I just report it then? Report it to the police if that happens?
And if it is something like that, you can and probably should.
Yeah.
Your mother is working somewhere, and there is some co-worker or boss in the place who wants to have their way with her. And because she's not interested and she rejects their advances, that co-worker or that boss puts down a wad of money somewhere one day, calls her into his office, tells her to go for it and bring it come. Then the following, she goes for it, brings the money to him, whatever, gone about her business. The following day, or maybe even months later, right, or years later, security footage is pulled up from a camera, and they said, and that co-worker, that boss says, some money went missing in the office on XYZ date, And for months and years, we're trying to figure out what happened, And it just dawned on us. But there was a camera in that vicinity. Let's look at the camera and see what happened. The camera picks up your mother picking up that money. Where the boss did send her for yeah? The same one who is accusing her now, right? So all because he couldn't have his way with her. Him set her up and tell on her. Now imagine some other boss is in the place and what have you. This footage now, our co-worker. So this footage now is presented to the boss. And says, see, right? It's Kalilah mother thief their money or whatever. They should just summarily dismiss her and send her home. No, so. No,
I get your point, but I'm trying to get to what are some dismissible offenses. And granted, even with these dismissible offenses, it's not just a you're fired situation. You still have to go through the due process.
That's the point. Correct.
But what are some offenses that you can start the process to part ways with an employee over?
All right. So dismissible offenses for the most part. Theft, gross insubordination. So gross insubordination is when you are given, as the police would term it, lawful instructions, right? And you fail to carry them out. Gross insubordination is also if you are unnecessarily and extremely rude and disrespectful to your superiors, right? And perhaps to acting in defiance of what under any circumstance would be reasonable instructions. And again, this is why having a process to determine that is so important. Because if I work for you, Kalilah, and you give me a set of instructions, and I refuse to carry them out because I believe that those instructions are unreasonable, or they are not within my job description, or you're only giving me those instructions out of spite and malice, or I might even have a medical condition or something of the sort, some phobia that prohibits me, or some religious reason, whatever it is, from carrying out those instructions. But because you gave me the instructions and I didn't carry them out and you're the boss, you fire me. This is why having a process is so important, because the person who is making the accusation is given the opportunity to present their reasoning, to present their case, and likewise the person who is accused gets an opportunity, and the law permits them to bring representation if they wish, whether it is a trade unionist, industrial relations consultant,
Right.
whoever, right? And present a defense to those charges, which, by the way, the other part that gets employers into trouble all the time, the law is very clear. The charges must be in writing.
So you send them a letter.
Send them a letter.
Okay.
Write them a letter.
So theft, gross insubordination, what else is a dismissible offense? And violence, I can imagine.
Violence on the job. Well,
Two co-workers get into a fight, a physical altercation.
if the two of you want to fight, wait till the two of you go out on the road. If you do it on the people's work compound, it can be a dismissible offense. That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
You spoke about sexual harassment. Is that a dismissible offense?
All right. So you'd be aware that there is a sexual harassment law that was just passed
Right.
in Parliament. Boy, and thanks to that law, even somebody like me who is normally very gregarious and friendly, right? I now have to be so careful, right? How I even pass a compliment now, because in the workspace, right? If you look at, it's quite tedious to read in some aspects, but if you look at what that sexual harassment law says, even some things that somebody like me innocently doesn't know, right? Thanks to that law now, if the person who I do it to decides to interpret that as them being sexually harassed, they could pursue a case against me. Right? And
But could the employer dismiss that employee for that reason?
if you go through a process, because sexual harassment, even before this law, though, sexual harassment is something where if it can be proven, right, then clearly you can't keep both of those persons in the same space, right? For the same reasons that if there was an act of violence, you wouldn't keep them there. That person poses a risk, right? And also, in addition to posing a risk, that person would have right away caused the work environment to become uncomfortable, if not toxic. Now, one of the things that the industrial relations laws provides for is a thing that you call here in Jamaica constructive dismissal, right? So it wouldn't necessarily be a firing per se. Any employer or employee at the end of a disciplinary process could always choose to pursue what's called a constructive dismissal. A constructive dismissal is where both parties, meaning the employer and the employee, have gotten to a stage where they have determined that it is no longer viable for all of them to continue in the same workspace. Right? Granted, these things happen every day. So take, for example, in the police force, all the time you hear that a police officer might have been transferred here or transferred there. So when you have situations like those, that's easier for them to deal with, because you are able to have the person keep their job, but they just carry out that job somewhere in a different space.
Right.
In some entities where you have one fixed location, obviously that's not possible. So what do you do in a case like that? If it gets to the stage where it can be reasonably determined, just like with a marriage, that there are irreconcilable differences, right? It doesn't make any sense that the employee stays there, because they will never be comfortable, they will never be happy, there will always be tension, all right, and vice versa. So it's neither fair to the employee nor the employer.
And that's what's called a constructive dismissal.
In those cases, you would be best guided to pursue a constructive dismissal. Yes.
Thank you so much for your input today, Collin.
Not a problem.
Appreciate it.
Not a problem.
And here's a recap of some of Collin's key points.
When determining if you should fire someone, you cannot make yourself judge, jury, and executioner. Some dismissible offenses are theft, gross insubordination, violence on the job, and sexual harassment. Constructive dismissal is when both parties agree to part ways under the circumstance, usually if the work environment is toxic. That's it for this episode of Money Moves, JA, brought to you in partnership with EXIM Bank's Business Advisory Service, giving you the tools to grow your business. Visit their website at eximbankja.com and visit my website, KalilahReynolds.com, for a summary of this episode. You can click the link in the description box below. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. Until next time.
Let's get this money.